Hello, we will discuss here the relationship between arts and sciences, especially when they shape creatively the work of various figures of the science or art world. Therefore, our talk is entitled Artists and Scientists. Transareality is a notion based on the generalization of Ottmar Ette's concept of Transarea that we applied to Humboldt's work in 2019 during the international conference to grasp the whole world. In brief, it refers simultaneously to a travel between various cultural areas, but also between various disciplinary areas. We will study here how transareality emerges in different scientists or artists that we have studied during our research.
Hello, my name is Hélène Fleury. I obtained 2 master's degrees, one in history and one in anthropology. During several years, I was working as project leader in the fields of culture and youth politics. I am currently lecturer in visual and heritage studies at the University of Évry and PhD candidate at the Paris-Saclay University in cooperations with the Center for South Asian Studies in Paris. My research concerns mostly the receptions and globalizations of Mitila paintings, worldwide exhibitions, transcultural mediators, and the constructions of a transnational cultural field, and more widely, interculturality and transfer studies. I am the author of 14 scientific publications, and I was invited to present my work during 18 international conferences and seminars in Algeria, Australia, Finland, France, India, and Portugal. I also organized a doctoral conference at EHESS in 2016.
My name is Damien Ehrhardt. I earned my PhD degree at the Sorbonne and my habilitation or accreditation to supervise research at the University of Strasbourg. I am currently tenured associate professor at the University of Paris-Saclay in Évry. My research concerns musicology and interculturality. As president of the Alumni Association of the Humboldt Foundation in France, I organized or co-organized numerous interdisciplinary conferences called Humboldt Kollegs on very different topics like emotions, unity in diversity, or uncertainty.
Art science, relationships, and more generally interdisciplinarity have been anything but obvious, especially in the 20th century, as pointed out by Jean-Marc Lévy-Leblond. In the 20th century, we can say that science develops in an almost total indifference towards the artistic movement, and the reciprocal is valid. It is not true on the level of the techniques. In the 20th century remains, for the most part, a moment of mutual indifference. These quotations suggest that the relations between arts and techniques would be better than the relationships between arts and sciences. This is most certainly due to the fact that technologies are likely to open new horizons to the arts. Two opposite attitudes are emerging: the inclusive visions uniting art and science, and the exclusive visions leading the withdrawal into its own field of research. The proponents of art for art or science for science are therefore exclusive. The proponents of applied science and art, like designers, inclusive. There would be a link between the involvement in applied disciplines and the implementations of a dialogue between arts and sciences. This connection is certainly due to common objectives beyond art and science, as specific socioeconomics projects or global ones, when the planetary stakes tend to impose an enlarged view of knowledge. Few phenomena fit unilaterally into one of the terms inclusive or exclusive. Beyond the binary oppositions, two antagonistic ideal types corresponding to the exclusive and inclusive visions can serve as a frame of reference to situate disparate phenomena. The exclusive visions implies a monodisciplinarity thinking opposed to transdisciplinarity, in the same way as being oriented on a single discipline contrast with working across disciplines. Furthermore, the exclusive visions focuses on disciplinary identity when the inclusive one requires confronting otherness in order to reach a meta level. Not only disciplines are instrumental in the case of transareality, but also interculturality. Usually, the intercultural experiences is different when referring to nearby countries whose cultures are relatively well known than in the case of distant countries of which people often have only an exoticized image. This distance also appears in the field of interdisciplinarity. Indeed, there is a certain proximity between philosophy and history, even if the methods are not the same. A philosopher can contextualize his concepts within history, while historians refer to philosophy when they wonder about their theoretical tools. This proximity is also palpable between related scientific disciplines, for example, physical chemistry and applied physics. But it is very difficult to open an interdisciplinary dialogue in a broader sense of the term between large disciplinary areas, arts, humanities, sciences. The term area applies here to large regions of the world or large sets of disciplines. Area thinking tends toward stability, whereas cultural and scientific phenomena should be considered in the dynamics of their relationality. The situation is similar between the main area of knowledge. Connecting cultural and disciplinary areas should be necessary in order to compare views on globalization and to respond to global issues. Beyond transareal dynamics, the suffix ity recalls unifying concepts like glissant, mondiality, applicable to the state of presence of cultures in the respect of diversity, or Spivak's planetarity, that understands the planet as a unified natural space, a kind of otherness on which we depend. We will
now give some examples of the application of transareality to different scientists or artists that we have studied doing our research. Alexander von Humboldt, for example, Olivier Messiaen, and Mildred and William Archer. At first, the example of Alexander von Humboldt, from which we have forged the notion of transareality. After that, we will briefly show that this concept is applicable to other figures of various disciplines. As an Enlightenment scientist, Humboldt was measuring the world. He was convinced that all results can be reduced to numerical relations, and he was proud of his instrument-based scientific approach. He made many inventions and discoveries, for example, the theory concerning the periodic swarms of meteors, the discovery of the fluvial system Amazon-Orinoco, the law of the decrease in mean temperature with the increase in elevation above the sea level, the invention of isotherm lines. He also allowed the opening of new research fields as geography of plants, scientific orography, or early American studies. But Humboldt's vision of cosmos, which was at the origin of ecology, was broader than his scientific approach. His geography is connecting science, cosmopolitics, and even geopoetics. For him, social, economic, and political problems are linked to environmental issues. Concerning his conception of geopoetics, he was convinced that a book on nature must contain its objective as well as subjective sides. Our inner world is constructed by the impressions that nature provokes in us. Nature is seen as a work of art. He speaks about nature paintings, in French, tableau de la nature, or music from the rocks. Humboldt was involved in various branches of knowledge and transcended them at the same time. Considering himself as a stranger between disciplines, he managed to be recognized in some of them and even created new ones. The same can be said about his connections with global regions and languages. He became specialized in different cultural areas and learned to think in different languages. He can be considered as a specialist of area studies coming from the natural sciences. But Humboldt was able also to situate these areas into a global panorama. This is the case of his research in the natural sciences based on a comparative analysis of data from the entire world, but also the contrastive linguistic studies he conducted together with his brother Willem. Let's speak now briefly about two figures concerning our respective research. The composer Olivier Messiaen can be considered as having traveled between cultural and disciplinary areas. His musical aesthetics is based on very different fields of knowledge. Bergson's philosophy of duration, various scientific theories as expansion of the universe, microphysics, relativity, and his experience as an ornithologist. In this latter field, he found bird song fascinating and was notating it worldwide. He incorporated bird song into his music, for example, in the composition Oiseaux Exotiques. Some of his artistic innovations that make his music distinctive, for example, relationship between time and music, use of bird song, come from his Transarea positioning as well as his interest in South and East Asian music.
Because of the vastness of their interest, Mildred and William Archer are situated halfway between anthropology and art. The rigor of their fieldworks and archival works, especially in BR, brings them closer to anthropology. On the other hand, they are not artists in the strict sense of the word, although William had planned for a while to become a writer, but collectors and above all, art historians committed, in William's case, to Indian modernism. The archers are thus situated in a third space, allowing them to reconcile the horizon of anthropologists for the preservations of local cultures and that of the artists of the primitivist Western avant-garde, drawing inspirations from folk and tribal arts to create. Thanks to their positioning and the scope of their fields of investigations, the archers achieved an inclusive vision of the art-anthropology relations in a time when the two terms were hardly reconcilable. They are mediators not only between India and Europe, but also between disciplinary areas, art and anthropology. They are transcultural and transdisciplinary mediators close to the notions of transareality.
Also, it does not always offer the expected recognition to those who practice it. Transareality is likely to be instrumental in innovation and creativity. It can be hypothesized that the intensity of innovation is correlated to the degree of interdisciplinarity and interculturality. From this point of view, transareality applying to more distant disciplines and countries would be even more capable of favoring breakthrough innovation and paradigm shifts. In this context, the dialogue between a Senegalese writer, a Canadian philosopher, and a Chinese physicist would prove to be fruitful. They rarely meet, and when they do, it happens inadvertently. And if they do start a conversation, they must be able to exchange on their respective fields to achieve added value. It is therefore necessary, in addition to scientific or artistic specializations, to promote an inclusive arts sciences vision and more generally transareality, to generalize them as much as possible to inter-individual and even collective exchanges. This approach seems indispensable today in order to rethink together the planetary stakes. We thank you for your attention.